Hi everyone. So for my research project, I wrote my paper on bilingual education and bilingual education programs. So for this presentation, we will be talking about the historical perspective, and then the different types of bilingual education programs, and then we'll compare that to other monolingual ESL programs, and then we'll also address some misconceptions of bilingual education, and then the needs of English learners in the context of bilingual education, and finally, I'll make a case for why bilingual education works better than other ESL programs. So bilingual education, simply defined, is when content is taught through an additional language other than the primary target language. In the context of English language development, bilingual education programs teach English learners academic subjects in their primary language in tandem with the target language, or English. Okay, so for historical perspective, in the 18th and 19th century, all the way up until World War I, it was called the permissive period, where linguistic diversity and bilingual education was generally accepted. And then that shifted to a restrictive period through the first 2 or 3 decades of the 20th century, where the fear of immigrants and foreigners kind of took over the general attitude of the United States, and bilingual education, or really linguistic diversity, was no longer generally accepted. And then after World War II, we moved into an opportunist period where there were a lot of opportunities for proponents of bilingual education and bilingualism because of the civil rights movements, and there was a general push for equal opportunity for language minorities. And finally, in the last 4 decades, we have moved into what's called a dismissive period, where bilingual education hasn't quite disappeared, but there is more of a push and controversy against it, or around it now. Okay, so there are different types of bilingual education. There are 2 main types. There's maintenance and transitional. So maintenance bilingual education, the goal is to maintain bilingualism and biliteracy. And the curriculum is taught in both the home language and the target language, and equal amounts of the language is maintained and continued throughout elementary school or longer. Some maintenance programs include bilingual immersion and two-way dual immersion. In transitional bilingual education, the goal is monolingualism in the target language. So in the United States, that would be English. Initially, transitional bilingual education teaches in the home language until the student becomes proficient in the target language. And the use of home language decreases as proficiency in the target language increases. Some transitional programs include early exit and late exit. Okay. So now we'll compare bilingual programs to monolingual programs. In bilingual education, they use both the home language and the target language for their instruction, whereas monolingual ESL only uses the target language. Bilingual education is ideal for schools and districts where most language minority students speak the same home language, whereas monolingual programs are ideal for schools and districts where the language minority population is very diverse. And finally, bilingual education aims to improve academic content knowledge, primary language skills, and English language skills, where monolingual ESL programs really only focus on improving English language skills. So there are some misconceptions of bilingual education. One of the misconceptions is that bilingual education keeps students from learning English. However, it's actually quite the contrary. Teaching in their primary language will help with second or target language acquisition. Stephen Krashen mentioned in his journal entry that it is easier to learn to read in a language you understand. Once you can read in one language, this knowledge transfers rapidly to any other language you learn to read. Once you can read, you can read. Another myth is that bilingual education is a threat to majority languages. However, maintaining home language does not diminish the value or the importance of acquiring the majority language. And especially in the context of the United States, because the United States is such a big global power and English is spoken all around the world, really learning or maintaining a home language is not diminishing the value of English, and the language of English has never really been threatened. And lastly, a myth that a majority of the people are opposed to bilingual education. However, there are multiple surveys that point to a strong favor of the underlying principles of bilingual education and using primary language for instruction in schools. So currently there are no ELD programs that address all needs of English learners. However, there are two needs of ELs, especially long-term ELs, that are explicitly addressed in bilingual education programs, but not so much in other ESL programs. So English learners need both language development and content knowledge development, and primary language development plays a crucial role in overall language and literacy development. Okay. So finally, I think that both bilingual and monolingual ELD programs achieve near similar results, and unfortunately, neither of them are doing English learners justice. However, bilingual education programs achieve the same but usually better results as English-only programs, and students in bilingual education programs are more likely to maintain bilingualism and biliteracy, which is a skill that is very much valued in the 21st century. And finally, students also get to preserve their home language and their unique cultural identity. And so these are the reasons why I believe that bilingual education works and that they are more effective than other ESL programs. And here are my resources for the paper and for this project. Thank you.